But no, on a serious note, I appreciate you being here. I'm Jim Shockey, as a lot of you guys know. Yesterday I was here. Eva couldn't make it. People acted like they didn't believe me yesterday when I said it. My name is Nate Hosie. Born and raised here in Pennsylvania. Still live in Pennsylvania with my wife and my two little boys, Cruz and Nash. From just north of Scranton, a little town called Montdale, PA. And in case you're wondering, there is no turkeys up that way. So no, you don't gotta go that way if you're looking for any turkey hunting. But I'm from outside of Scranton, and this show, to be able to come down here and spend some time playing music, get to talk about turkey hunting with people, this means a lot to me. As a kid, I've been coming to the show for as long as I can remember. And when I first started in the hunting business, I worked for a call company out of Renovo, Pennsylvania called Top Calls. And I'd be a sales rep for them while working at Gander Mountain, and started getting into the turkey calling circuit for a brief time. Until I knew Hunter Wallace was going to start calling it. For those of you who know Hunter Wallace or have seen him, whenever he comes around calling, you just get out of the circuit quickly so you don't have to call against them. But I started at this show with Hunter Specialties as a field producer. And I would call competitively in the competitions down here. Won the Harrisburg Open one year with Hunter Specialties. And would work this show all 9 days. And so a lot of the roots of my start in the hunting business is here at this show. So understand, to be able to come down here and talk to you guys about turkey hunting and celebrate the woods and the outdoors and play some music on Wednesday and tomorrow night at the concert, this is extremely humbling for me, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to come here and sit and listen today. The greatest gift any of us can give each other is our time, so I appreciate your time today as we go through some tips and tactics for turkey hunting. And one thing that I always try to get out of the way first, I am not up here, I don't think there's any such thing, maybe Jim Shockey, as a true pro hunter. I think all of us are hunters. I get the opportunity to do it a lot, and through the television show with Headhunters TV, being in its 13th season, I've seen a lot of scenarios with what I get to do. That doesn't mean that on any given moment I'm not getting my butt kicked out there in the woods by every turkey or every deer or every whatever it is that I'm hunting. So, keep in mind too, I'm just thankful to be here, and if I could help you with some questions that you have from something that I may have seen along the way, I'm glad to do so. But understand, I don't stand here labeling myself as a pro. You know what I'm saying? But before we get started, what I usually like to do, my buddy Jase is here with Chase. Chase, stand up. Everybody say hey to Chase. So this kid, I've been able to follow him since he's been young, because he's got a great dad, Jase, who does a lot of field producing for us. One of the greatest hunters and producers that I've had the opportunity to share the woods with. And he is, above all, he's a great dad. And his little boy Chase has become an unbelievable hunter. And if you check him out on YouTube, you can see his hunts along the way. So really, when I got here and saw Chase, I was like, I'm nervous. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm nervous because he knows all my weaknesses, number one. Number two, I feel like with his career, he should be up here. But Jase is doing it right, and Chase being here is an example of what this is supposed to be. It's passing it on to the next generation, celebrating the outdoors with kids like my man Chase. So give it up for my man Chase being here. Check him out.
Chase, sit down, bro. Sit down.
And anything that you feel like I'm saying it's not right, just keep to yourself. Just don't embarrass me in front of this man. But Jase and I have had the opportunities, to share the woods on a lot of amazing hunts. So before we get started, I'm gonna run a few hunts that you guys can see and kind of set the mood right for this seminar as we go forward. So as long as I know how to do this, we'll check out some of these hunts and then we'll talk. For those of you wondering, that was a 100-yard shot. You'll hear Jay scolding me here.
Yeah, buddy.
Beautiful timber hunt, and I am tagged out in my home state of Pennsylvania.
This hunt, I'll tell you a funny story about this one as we get going. Remind me of the woods hunt. So those are just a few hunts. You know, like I said, that first one was a 100-yard shot. First time I ever pulled that off. But that's basically been over the last couple of years. You know, as I was saying, I'm born and raised in Montvale, PA, and started hunting with my dad and my grandpa when I was 5. Now, obviously, we didn't have the mentor program back then, so I had an Orvis cap gun, and we would hunt over bird dogs for pheasants. My dad had some friends and business associates that they would put pheasants out during small game season every week, and we go out with a Brittany in a lab, and I'd be busting caps at everything that took flight. And as I grew up, my grandfather got me into whitetail hunting, and I'd go out with him, and then to where I first started, you know, shooting at whitetails. And then when I was first introduced to spring turkey hunting, you know, my first turkey I ever shot was in the fall, and it was cool. You know, we had busted the flock up, and you know, they came in yelping and stuff. But when I first went out there and experienced with my neighbor Butch and Bob, the interaction in the spring, I mean, I was hooked right from the start. And I think what really got me was the conversation. You know, for whitetail hunting, most of the time you're on the defense. You know, not that you're not offensively making moves or positioning yourself to hang a tree stand, set a food plot, set a blind. But a lot of whitetail seasons, for most people, not that it doesn't happen quick sometimes, there's a lot of just sitting around waiting. You know, to where turkey hunting, it's like, oh, he's gobbling, I hear him in there, let's go. You know, and that doesn't mean that there's some days you don't hear anything, you go and rely on your woodsmanship and sit tight until he comes through. But I loved the interaction, I loved the conversation back and forth. So I became obsessed with learning how to turkey call, and I tried every single call I could possibly run. I tried every mouth call, I tried the push button yelpers, remember the ones that went on your gun, they had the string, you pull the string, you know, the Lynch foolproof box call. Anything I can get my hands on, I would annoy my parents and my sisters consistently, you know, with noises. But then I figured out how to get my mom involved to where she wouldn't flip out on me. I was like, Mom, let's play name that call. You know, so as long as she was like, oh, okay, go for it. I might, you know, hit a fly down cackle. You know, so I started to involve her in that. When I used to go on dates with my now wife, we started dating in 8th grade in high school. Some of our dates consisted of busting up flocks of turkeys and calling them back in so I could listen to those hens come back. You know, she'd be sitting there next to me in her pink Victoria's Secret sweatpants while we were calling turkeys in. And at that point, even though I was only in 8th grade, I was like, I think I should marry this girl. You know, I feel like if she's on a date with me right now to call hens back in, you know, she's probably a keeper. And here we are all these years later, 20-some years later, we got 2 beautiful boys, and, you know, she is definitely the boss hen, let's put it that way. But I became obsessed with it, so I started wanting to learn everything about turkey hunting. I wanted to learn how to be as realistic as I could be. A lot of that came from, just like I was saying, busting you know, flocks up in the fall, calling them back in, not necessarily shooting them, listening to the vocalization. listen to a hen come back to my call, you know, all the imperfections. A lot of times when you watch, like, let's say a competitive competition, it's perfection. They're being judged off of perfection. You know, when they're running their scenarios, to where when you're in the turkey woods, it's the imperfections that add realism. A lot of times as those hens are walking through the woods and they're yelping, if you pay attention, there's a lot of ups and downs in their cadences, a lot of ups and downs in their sequence. And what they're doing is, you know, she may be walking through and she's up and down in what she's doing, because not only is she yelping, but she's basically listening as well as she's calling. So there's a lot of variations that I always say are the imperfections of calling. You know, not every time is it just a perfect yelping scenario, but if it is, that's a great time to practice. So as I grew up, you know, in my high school, my buddies and the teachers used to call me the turkey slayer at that point, because I would take anybody that would go. My father-in-law now was my homeroom teacher at the time. Spent a lot of time yelling at me. He was also my football coach. Somebody was just here that was talking to me about the glory days when I played for Lakeland, but I played a lot of football, so at the time, it appeared like he was yelling at me for coming in late every single day in May, but I know he was just saying, I really hope this is the guy that marries my daughter someday. You know, it didn't feel that way in the moment, but now looking back on it, I tell him all the time, I'm like, Coach, I know what you were saying then. You know, and although it felt mean at the time, it was really compassion. But then it became business deals. I would take the principal. Why would I take the principal? Number one, he was a friend. Number two, if I took the principal, he understood why I was late every single day. You know what I mean? So he gets to feel a part of it. So I had a great community of support around me as well. And going back to the show and my roots, as I grew up, my parents said I can go for anything I wanted to do. I was like, I want to make a living in the hunting business, in the outdoor space. They said, you do whatever you want to do, you got to get a college degree. After that, how you strut wherever you want to go. So I got a college degree, and in the meantime, had a minor in telecommunications and started to pursue the TV side of hunting. Was fortunate enough, many of you may know a guy named Matt Moret. He's a local from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and a turkey legend. I was able to align with him and do a bunch of filming with him, with Hunter Specialties and Eddie Salter and all of those guys. So one year while I was down here, does anybody remember the hen squealer? That's a good thing. You don't want to remember. But I do, because I was forced to have to sell it at this show. And Eddie Salter came out, he said, we've got a call. It's going to change the turkey hunting business. I said, well, let's hear it. And all he did was just squeal on this thing. I'm like, I'm going to be honest, I've never heard a single hen do that, you know, but I'm not going to question Eddie by any means, and I'm still not questioning Eddie. But I'm going to say it's a tough call to sell to somebody when they're like, well, why don't you run it for me? And I don't know what I'm running. You know, I'm just making noises that sounds like a hen either distress or potentially breeding. I don't know what Eddie was, you know, explaining on this. Well, in the meantime, one day while I was running that call, a guy walked by and said, that sounds like death. It's like, you don't even know what this sound is. It's above you, you know. And he said, whatever it is that's awful, you should stop. Yeah, that guy happened to be Randy Birdsong. And at the time, he was with Whitetail Freaks. So I knew who Randy was, and him and I became friends after that. And long story short, 13 years later, after meeting here at the Harrisburg show, we've had Headhunters TV on the Outdoor Channel. First year was obviously it was a risk. We had nothing to our names, and we thought, you know, this show will probably fail. And the number one goal is to go out there, not to prove to anybody, again, going back to the beginning, that we're great hunters or pro hunters or anything like that, just to let people know we love it. And we love this heritage of the outdoors, of passing it on to the next generation, and let people see the positive light of what hunting brings to people's lives and people's families and the heritage that they've had. So, you know, like I said, that's where we're at now, and now we'll get into, that was a little bit of an introduction on me, and kind of how I got to this position today to be able to have the opportunity to come down and talk with you guys. And so going into tips and tactics on turkeys, understand at any moment if you have questions about these, any of the situations, feel free to ask at any moment. This is more of a Q&A. Like I said, I've been a part of a lot of scenarios through testing products, through testing decoys, through different things that maybe I'll be able to help answer some of the questions you might have. First thing I want to talk about is decoys. Does everybody here, or most people, do a lot of people utilize decoys? How many just go straight old school, no decoy? Yeah, so we still have, yeah, which is also an extremely effective method. Growing up, you know, making those turkeys look for you is one of the most effective ways to get a turkey in close. One thing I've noticed with these decoys over the years, especially filming, is their ability to, A, give you really good footage, but also give you the ability for that turkey, as he's coming, to take his attention off of you, take his attention off your movement. As you saw in that first hunt, that turkey, he ended up at about 4 steps away from us when he came up over the top of that strutting decoy. I mean, but never once did he even look my direction, because he was so mad coming across that field, knowing that that other strutter was in that field, that he was completely tunnel visioned to only that strutter. Early on in the season like that, which that was early spring, consistently I'm running usually 1 upright hand decoy and 1 strutter. And what I found, if you guys saw a lot of those hunts, or several of those hunts where they come to that strutter, I always position it where he sees the front of that turkey first. Now, that's not in a situation to say that if he sees the back of it, that is not going to work. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that for me, when I'm utilizing a turkey decoy, especially a strutter, I always want the first thing he sees to be that head of that decoy. And a lot of times what I'll do is, after the first year or two of using a strutter or a jake, I'll go to the hardware store and get bright white paint, and I'll repaint that head, you know, as white as I can make it. Because a lot of times, if you're in dark timber, early mornings, things like that, I honestly feel like that is what they lock to. You know, they see that, you know, a lot of you know, when you're calling a turkey up, a lot of times you'll catch his head and it looks like a light bulb coming, you know, when you see him coming. And that's the first thing I think they lock to. And it kind of gives them the ability to size them up as they're making their way in. So when utilizing a strutting decoy, early spring for me is when I'm most likely to attempt that. Because in a lot of scenarios with a strutter, you could potentially spook turkeys too. You know, if you have a turkey that's not dominant per se, if he's submissive, you know, turkeys are like people. Everybody has different personalities, to where not all of them are going to be fighters. Not all of them are going to come in, see a strutter, and come running right down to your setup. That's just not the way it's going to work. Sometimes it's going to work against you. But most of the time when I'm utilizing a strutter, especially early spring, I'm always going to run one. Reason being, they're still trying to figure out who is the dominant tom, who is the man. A lot of you know, when you've been in the turkey woods, early spring, a lot of times you're calling multiple gobblers in at one time. Maybe there's 2, 3, 4. I mean, the number could be endless, but a lot of times they're still grouped up early like that. They have a lot more confidence early in the spring than some of them have later, because, you know, they may have their butt kicked or whatever for many different reasons. So early spring like that, most of the time I'm running an upright and a strutter, simply because I have a lot of woods at home. Most people here have a lot of woods, a lot of fields, or kind of all over the place. A mix. Anybody straight timber?
Pretty much, mostly, yeah.
Yeah, straight timber. So whenever I'm hunting in straight timber, I always want to run an upright. Not that I won't use a feeder occasionally, but I want to run a decoy that could be seen. And what I've noticed a lot in the woods of Pennsylvania, you know, whether you're hunting ridges or, you know, flats or benches or whatever, a lot of times when they're in the woods, especially if you're using a strutter, that second hunt, for example, when he was strutting down and he came to that landing where I was on the right side of that log, that turkey, I had a little open spot in the timber there. So I put that strutter out in that open clearing. It was like an old log landing where he could see it good. Mm-hmm. I also feel like when you're hunting deep, heavy woods like that, turkeys like to get comfortable to those strutters. They want to feel like they have space to work their way into them. So I've messed up a lot of hunts in the past where I'll come to an edge of a ridge, I'll cut down and yelp, strike a turkey, start working him. He comes, I stick my decoy in the ground. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. And as he gets to the top of that hill, just as he's coming up, he comes up over the hill, sees the decoy, and doesn't like it. Now, he's gobbled the entire way coming up. He feels like he's ready to go, and he's worked to your call, but he spooks. In my opinion, you know, I didn't give him enough space to get comfortable to that decoy. And, you know, if he comes right up on it, a lot of times I've had them booger in woods and fall back off that hill. Now, they might gobble again, but then he sits down there and he gobbles, you know, 100 times. You're trying to move on him, and he doesn't want to come up and finish.
He's not going to commit.
Yeah, so a lot of times what I'll do in the hardwood section, I'll actually, and Jason and I've done this a bunch, I'll set my decoys maybe 30 yards back. And then what I'll do is I'll get to wherever I feel comfortable, where I don't think he'll see me at any point, and I'll start working that turkey from the edge, right? And now as I hear him getting closer, or, you know, if he starts to break and come my way, well, then I'll slowly fall back. You know what I mean? And I'll slowly fall back, and I'll keep working him to where I know. And then as he's getting closer, you know, then I'll finally get back to where, you know, I could still hear him good, he could hear me, but now when he comes up, he doesn't expect me to be right there at that lip, you know, in hard timber. So if you have straight timber, if you're utilizing decoys, especially the strutter, you know, the more space you can give them to work to your setup, the more success you're going to find, or the more success that I have found over the years. That other hunt that I told you was kind of a funny story, the one that was in the woods. So since I've been a kid, I've had permission on all kinds of farms around my hometown. A lot of great friends that allow me to hunt, and I don't own any of these farms. You know, they allow me to hunt and allow me to take people hunting and stuff. Well, they allow other people to hunt as well, you know what I mean, which is great. So with as much as I get to hunt across the country, I try my best not to go to those places where maybe a lot of people hunt, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to take away from somebody who maybe only has a weekend to hunt or something like that. So one day, Jase and I, we went and roosted these turkeys over at my lease. I was like, man, I feel good about it in the morning. And on the way back, I was like, let's just swing past John's place real quick and just hit a call. It was on the way back to my house on this gravel road. So I get out and call, and these turkeys, I mean, are just, I mean, the second you touch the call, and they're 500-600 yards away, I mean, they're just screaming up there on that rib. You know, we're out in this field calling, they're just screaming. So I was like, well, I'm sure they probably work too, you know, if we went in there. So Jason's like, I'm not going if we're not going there. I'm like, dude, I was like, I don't know, it's gonna be a community hole tomorrow. Like, I don't know. So let me sleep on it. So we sleep on it, and next morning I said, here's the deal. We're gonna go past John's. If there's nobody there, we'll hunt. It'll be meant to be. If somebody's there, we're gonna push on and go to the lease. We get in there, nobody's there. We're perfect. Pull up, we go up on that hillside, starts breaking day. We get all set up. Turkeys are gobbling hard. Well, just about probably 5 minutes or so before fly down, I hear a branch break to my right. So we're set up, this tree was, I turn to my right, I look like 50, 60 yards to my right, and there's an orange hat walking with their gun, right? And I'm like, you know, I'm like trying to get his attention, and he's just walking, right? These turkeys are gobbling, so I'm like, man. So I'm like, hey, like I'm doing everything I can, you know, like I'm like almost yelling at the guy. He just walks right on by us. Like doesn't even see me. It's like, I told Jase, we must be like ninjas. So finally I'm like, Jase will tell you the raw footage. I'm like, what the fuck? I told you we should have went to the lease. I get up, I'm all flustered. I'm like, I have to walk down there and tell this guy we're here. You know what I mean? So I get up, I go walking down, and he's tucking in against the tree down there. I'm like, hey brothers, hey, oh. I didn't know you were in here. I was like, yeah, we're like right there. We're sitting right there. He's like, I was wondering what that glow was. Because he could see the back of the camera screen glowing, you know, because Jason's facing away. I was like, yeah, we're filming. He's like, you Nate? I was like, yeah. I was like, listen, where were you gonna hunt today if you didn't just see me? He was like, well, I was just gonna sit down in this field, which was down below us, well below us. I was like, all right, here's the deal. I was like, we're right up there. You're right here. They come to that field, you shoot them. They come up on this ridge, we'll shoot them, you know, just so we know where everybody's at, you know. Yeah, that sounds great. So he was coming from the neighbor's property. So we set up. So now I'm like all flustered. I'm all out of my game. And I'm calling up these turkeys and they're coming. Well, they get there at like 40 yards and I told Jase, I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it. I said, here's the deal. If they come right to that decoy, I'll shoot them. If not, I'm not shooting this turkey. I was like, you know, let them go down to the field to this guy. So we're sitting there, Jason's like, you're crazy. Why are we wasting our time? He's just in my ear the whole time, you know? Well, the turkeys come down, they stand there like literally 35, 40 yards, and they probably gobbled, what, 25 times?
It was a lot longer of a conversation than that.
Yeah.
Believe me.
There was a lot more
I'm like-
intensity in our voices. You know what I mean? So anyways, these turkeys are just sitting there just gobbling. Now, I can shoot these things at any given moment. I'm like, I'm not doing it because wholeheartedly, if they went down there, great. But I did say in the beginning, I was like, if they come right to these decoys, it's over. And all of a sudden, finally, for no apparent reason, they decide, here we come. You know, so I'm like, you made your decision. So they come down, and that's the one that I shoot up to the left-hand side there behind the decoy. The funniest part was, I fired, and that guy comes up after him. He's still walking up. He said, my goodness. I said, sorry, dude. He's like, sorry. I'm furious. He said, I'm sitting down there going, why isn't he shooting? He said, I've been sitting there for 25 minutes watching them in front of you. He said, I was about to crawl up. I thought you died at the tree. I was like, no, man, just trying to have a little respect. You know what I mean? But after I fired, that other turkey had no idea what really happened. And literally just sat around gobbling and walked off. So we never moved until, you know, that's why I just whispered and didn't come off. And because I was like, that guy was down there, so I was like, I didn't want to spook that other turkey, and he ended up walking away gobbling. So kind of a funny situation, but a lot of times I get things online like, yeah, it must be nice to only hunt private. I'm like, listen, I hunt a lot of private, but it's not just the private you think. You know what I mean? Eddie Salter and I one year had 3 different turkeys in one day get shot out from in front of us in Pennsylvania. One from a truck window. It was early spring. We were up on the hill. You could ask him. I was filming for Calm Turkey. He came across a gravel road. There was no leaves. We could see him down there 100 yards or so. And a truck came easing down, nice and slow. I was like, what are they doing? Next thing you know, the gun came out, bow, bow, they started firing out the window at the turkeys. So, have had some interesting moments in the Pennsylvania turkey woods. But back to decoys, I also like in fields and stuff, especially in an area where these turkeys are feeding a lot, then I'll utilize a feeder. Because a feeder I feel like is easier to be seen out there in a field, especially in an area they're used to feeding it. So upright a lot of times I'll run in the woods and it's all coming down to a visual. It's a little bit higher, you can position it in different ways. If you have a log landing or something, you know, there's nothing wrong with running a feeder there, but I like them to be able to see that outline of a turkey. And like I said, when I'm in fields or food plots or things like that, then I'll run a feeder. Does anybody have any specific questions around decoys or decoy placement or use? Does anybody have anything specific?
I heard one time that they tend to come into the backside of the strutters. They'll circle around and enter that way.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. And I have had in situations them come in to the backside of it. But I have noticed more times than not on turkeys personally that have boogered from a strutter, they've boogered from the backside of it. And because I really do believe, like for example, if you're running a Jake, right? And like I said, I'll paint the heads if I run it a couple years and it dulls out a little, I want them to see that glow of that head. I feel like more times than not, anytime if you notice, like on those hunts, every time a turkey breaks that I've got a hen and a strutter out, he goes to the strutter, always. You know, I've had them slow strut to a hen, like by herself, but majority of the time, if you're running a male decoy, majority of the time he's coming to that decoy first, right? Because he wants to set up dominance, you know, he wants to, that's what he's coming to. He's not necessarily only coming to that hen. But I have had more turkeys spook personally with the back of the tail than I have the front. For example, that one that I was just talking about, he comes to the front of the decoy, but then what he does is he circles up and comes around it, and then he circles down to the left side of it. But the majority of the time that I've had them, you know, work to that decoy, I've had it from the front side of when he's facing. As far as like calling goes too, any other questions on decoys? Go ahead, buddy.
How far do you usually put them out from you?
Close. But it's all come down to like Jase and I, it's become like Jase, you'll learn about Jase the more stuff of ours you watch. Like he's a perfectionist, you know, so like even that first hunt, you know, that it's to me, I'm like, this is the hunt of my life. Jase like, man, you know, lighting was decent. Could have been a little brighter. Dude, God, was he missing a tail feather? Oh, I'm like, Jase, it's not a big deal. But what I found on several of those hunts, when you turn around and Jase is jumping in the air, like that one hunt, you can hear him, you can't hear it as well on here, but he's literally screaming at me because we're set up away from each other to have that depth of field to where you can see me in the shot. And I had already told him, I want to shoot him when he gets to the decoys, but I can't see what Jase is seeing, right? So he's watching as this turkey's coming down, and he realizes once he emerges from that strutter, like I'm going to be right on top of him, you know, so he's going, wait. Meanwhile, I'm ready to burn him down, you know, for 30 seconds already. But what you also can't hear is behind Jase, a deer must have came in and gotten our wind and it's just back there. So I'm going, you ready? Are you ready? Because I'm thinking this turkey's gonna get freaked out at any second if these deer go running back over the hill or something. You know, and right now he's dialed in. So, you know, obviously when I shot, I turn around, I see Jase just jumping like a cheerleader. I'm like, it's gotta be good. And we ended up winning Golden Moose that year for that through the Outdoor Channel. So that was a pretty big accomplishment on our end. But I like to put them, when we're hunting, I like to put them like 5 yards. But that's always because that's just a personal thing. Ultimately, if I'm just going typical setup, 25, 30 yards. You know, 30 yards maybe because, you know, one thing that's good, I take a lot of people hunting too throughout the year. And I'm the only time that I'm putting it like 5 yards at me is when I'm hunting. Mostly because I want to give you the best chance to have a successful hunt. So a lot of times, your pattern's bigger at that point. You don't necessarily know everybody's shooting abilities, all that stuff. So if I'm just running a normal situation, not trying to shoot one close, 25 to 30 yards. Because then at that range, you still got a great pattern, it's still tight enough, and it's still close enough that your heart's gonna be pounding when he's at, 25, 30 yards. Another reason I like to put them a little bit closer, and I bet a lot of you have probably experienced this, sometimes they'll hang up on them. Like sometimes they'll work right, like they'll come, but once he kind of gets close, he may sit out there 20 yards from it. You know what I mean? So I still want to put it in a situation to where if he just doesn't finish right over to it, we could still, potentially make the shot and kill the turkey, even if he hangs up a little bit on him. Have had other moments and other situations to where, say we're working a turkey that has beat us up a few days. He's typically hanging up, 80 yards out there. Well, we've also done situations to where we'll put the decoys behind us, you know what I mean, and put a shooter out in front of those decoys. So now he's got to come through you to get there, and his focus isn't necessarily on you up there. His focus is back behind you on, your decoy setup. Or in states that it's legal, obviously in Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to, fan or stock head turkeys or things like that. But in states that it's legal, Kansas, different places, we've had moments where, a guy will get behind us with a strutter, and he'll work the strutter, and as that turkey's coming, you're set up ahead of him. But typically 25 to 30 yards, on a normal setup. Any other questions on decoys? Go ahead.
When you
Mike.
say strut decoys, are you talking like full strut
Full
decoys, or
strut.
say quarter strut decoys?
Full strut. I mean, quarter strut, basically, most of the time I'm running a full strut simply because we are with Flexstone, and they have that Thunder Creeper. So I utilize a full strut decoy a lot, stationary, with an upright hand. But any of the male decoys, like the Jakes or any of that stuff, most of the time, if you're set up and you've got a male decoy out, if he's gonna come, he's gonna come to that male decoy
Right.
first. If the hen's over there, he may go to her in a second. But the first thing, he's gonna get up, one of them's gonna go to
He's gonna wanna
that
run
male
that
first,
Jake off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like Jase back in the day in the honky tonk, you know what I mean? When he was strutting around, he'd come in there first and just bow up and start walking around. What's up, dude? You know how Jase, it's not anymore. He's a submissive Tom now. You know what I mean? You push him off the plot pretty easy. Any more decoy questions? How about as far as like calling scenarios go? Any questions direct straight towards calling? Any first time turkey hunters in here? I had a guy in here yesterday talking, first time turkey hunters.
Not my first time, but early on in the career.
I like it. Well, you're in for the most fun experience of your life as you start to learn all this stuff. You know what I mean? You run mouth calls or
I'm
friction.
trying to learn mouth call, but that's
Nice.
hard.
Yeah, we'll start out,
Constant sleep.
low reads, 2 reads, so you can start producing sounds, and then work your way up into, 3 read. I run a 3 read batwing right now, and love it. And my calling scenarios, I was telling people yesterday, when it comes to calling turkeys, somebody had asked me yesterday, do I change my calling throughout the year? And to be honest with you, I don't. I change my calling due to situations, due to scenarios. First thing I've learned in calling up a lot of turkeys and listening to a lot of hens, a lot of times hens are not extremely loud. Most of the time, they're not. You always get those ones that in your setup, we've all been there, especially if everybody's been hunting so long, where you get that mad hen that rolls up in there and she's cutting and yelping and carrying on, and we've all experienced that. But most of the time, when they're just milling around and doing their thing, they're not that loud. But their cadence is up and down. Their cadence changes. And that adds excitement as you speed up your yelping, you slow down your yelping, you add cuts, you add realism. Woodsmanship is always above calling. I've had the opportunity to be around and hunt with some of the best callers in the world, but the guys that taught me are some of the best woodsmen that I've ever been around. And they may not be able to call and win the Grand National, but they are certified turkey killers, because they understand how to use woodsmanship, how to put yourself in a position to understand where this turkey wants to be, where he wants to go to. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of stuff all comes into the role, or all comes into play, whenever you're taking the role of being a hen against a turkey. Your woodsmanship is always going to play a bigger role. But my calling scenario every morning, when I'm out there, I always like to let a turkey start. I like to let him start gobbling in the morning, if he will. If not, obviously I'll try to owl hoot at some point. I don't want to call to him too much until he's on the ground. For the only reason, being I don't want to hang him up in the tree. Most of the time, you're basically breaking nature's pattern when you call a longbeard in, because the reason he's in the tree gobbling, the reason he hits the ground gobbling, is that hen is gonna go to him. That's why he's singing. So, you're kind of breaking that trend there when you work them to you. But I always kind of start slow, and we'll start with some tree yelps, and then if he'll hit that, what I'll do from there is kind of liven it up a little bit, and I'll always start with like, one yelp and then a quick snap cut, just to kind of see how fast he hits that one cut, and go from there. Then once he's on the ground, if I know he's on the ground, I'll hit him with a fly down cackle, and then start working him from there. But my calling in the beginning of the season is still the same at the end of the season. Now, I adjust to different scenarios. I was telling people yesterday, there was a turkey a couple years ago in New York State that I could not kill. This turkey, you want to think they're smart, but at the same time, then you see like an Instagram video of him strutting at himself in the reflection of a car.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're not smart. They're schizophrenic that everything's gonna kill them, but they're not, they're surely not smart, but this turkey, no matter what I did, I tried calling hard, I tried calling soft, I tried not calling, I tried, everything you can think of. And was probably one of my favorite turkeys that I've shot over the last couple of years, because I finally got him. It was the last week of the season, and I got in there tight on him. I thought, this is the day, I know where he's at. I had good cover in the trees. I was able to get close, got a good setup, and waited. He gobbled a few times in the tree, and I cannot help myself. I was like, I'm gonna give one tree call, and that's it. I gave one tree call. He gobbled at it, and 10 minutes later, he flew to the other side of the mountain.
Yeah.
And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So my buddy was with me, I said, I'm done. I said, I gotta get this turkey killed. I said, just wait here. So I went, and I found an old logging road, and I started going down that logging road the direction I heard him fly down. Because when he flew down, he gobbled once he hit the ground. Barely. So I'm like, rascal. So I go over there, and I make my way down that ridge, and I yell, and when I call, he gobbles. So I'm like, all right, he's down that bottom somewhere. I ease down a little bit, start calling. I spend the next 20, 25 minutes yelping, he never makes another sound. You are ignorant. By the grace of God, I yelp one more time, and up behind me, a hen gets going. Now she's probably 75, 80 yards behind me up on the ridge. So at this point, I'm throwing a pity party. I'm at the bottom of the tree. I'm like, well, there's other things I could do in life, because I obviously can't shoot turkeys. I'm just sitting there. And all of a sudden, I look down in the timber, and I could see him just slowly coming up through there. Because what I now am realizing is, it's not that he doesn't want to gobble. It's that he doesn't want to gobble close, right? So after I stopped calling and she picked up, well, now he thinks I'm well away from him. So now he's coming up in there, and he just slowly keeps coming towards her. But what he doesn't know is like a new age Power Ranger. I'm tucked in tight, just waiting on this turkey. And I was actually like super nervous to shoot, because I was like, I finally got him. I'm thinking I'm gonna miss the fire out of this thing. And comes up in there and shot the turkey. But he taught me a lot. And I'm thankful for that. And that goes back to, there is no such thing as a pro hunter. I get my butt kicked just like anybody else does. But you learn a lot along the way, and that's what's fun about hunting. That's what's fun about the outdoors, about chasing turkey, is they will humble you at any given moment, but they teach you so much along the way. And another funny story about turkey hunting, Eddie Salter, a lot of you probably know Eddie, right? The turkey man. So we had permission at my friend's house, and a couple years ago, Eddie came up to hunt with me. This is for if you ever have the opportunity to hunt with Eddie. I'm looking out for you right now, so you'll know not to do this. It was probably around 11:30. We had until 12, obviously, and it was going to be the end of the day, and we're getting ready to go, and we strike a turkey right up behind Frank's house. So we were hunting at the farm, but like literally right behind his house, the turkey's gobbling probably 100 yards in there. So I got the turkey man with me. I was like, we got to get this turkey. Like, we can't go back to the house without this turkey. I said, but I got to stop and tell Frank, if he hears us shoot like right behind the house, 50, 60 yards in there, that we're, it's us. Not that he would care, but we're like, listen, I got to stop there. So I run up on the farm door, on his house door, and I wail on the door as hard as I could. And about that time, I hear this eruption to my right. And I look about from here to the projector, and there's like a bench right there from a patio table. And his German Shepherd was sleeping right there. Well, I scared him, I guess, right? Well, next thing you know, the last thing I saw was his mouth open sideways. and I mean, he latched on my right butt cheek so hard. So I'm at the table, or at the door, full camo, and I'm pinned against the door right now by this German Shepherd. So I'm trying to think of what to do as I'm like feeling this pain, and I'm looking in the window. Do I hit the dog? You know, like I'm trying to like hit it off me kindly while he's biting me. Well, Eddie, he's in the car behind me, and he can't think of nothing else to do, but he just starts beeping the horn in there. Right? He's just laying on the horn. Well, I'm now bayed up in the corner by this dog because he won't let me out. He let go of me now. So my buddy Frank comes around, and Eddie's just out there. Frank comes around, and he goes, "He won't bite you." I was like, "Yeah, all right." You know, I feel the blood going down my leg. So anyways, Frank says, "Yeah, man, yeah, y'all go in there. You know, they've been back in that timber." So we ease back in that timber a little ways. And I said, "Eddie, like, why didn't you get out, like, yell at the dog or do something?" He's like, "Man, I want to go get my rear bit." You know, that Alabama slang that he's got. So if you get attacked by a dog with Eddie, understand you're on your own. You know what I mean? No matter whether you're turkey hunting or not. So we go down in there, call the turkey up. Guess what? It's 3 jakes. You know, so I took one on the cheek for 3 jakes down there. But you know, so turkey hunting has been a part of a lot of fun stories along the way. Go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about that woodsmanship topic and like
Yeah.
what are we looking for in the woods? Like what areas should we key in on? Like how do you find?
It's a great
turkeys
question. That's a great question. And you know, for me over the years, like I said, I've been going for spring turkey since I've probably been 12 or 13. And as soon as I had my driver's license, as soon as I could travel around, the best advice I can give you when it comes to turkey hunting, and especially in a situation if you want to get several turkeys, if you have friends or family you want to go, you need to have dirt. You need to have ground. Because you can be the best caller, you can be the best hunter. If they're not there, you're not going to get them. You know, that's just the way it is. So you look for a lot of things. You look for habitat. You look for, you know, ridges, fields, whatever. Like where I live, there's a lot of pastures, a lot of farm ground, a lot of dairy farms, right? So obviously dairy farms a lot of times have turkeys. They're around the cows with the woods. So what I would do is I would spend a lot of time driving before season. You know, I would look around a lot. I would say, man, that place looks really turkeyish from things I've seen. Or maybe I was going for breakfast one morning and happened to see a flock of turkeys out in the field. Well, let me stop there and see if these people allow turkey hunting, you know, come springtime or whatever. Another thing you have to be careful of though, like right now a lot of times, and I'm sure a lot of you know this too, they may winter somewhere. And then come spring turkey season, you'll be like, man, I saw 100 turkeys there, you know, when it was snowing. And then you go there in the spring and you can't find a turkey. You know, they'll oftentimes winter somewhere different than they may be in the springtime. And going back to the dominant situation, once they start pushing each other around a little bit and breaking, you know, sometimes a turkey doesn't want to deal with this guy who's beating him up every single day. So he's going to go a couple miles down. And for example, anybody shoot a banded turkey yet in Pennsylvania? Has anybody killed any of the bands? So I was fortunate to get a banded turkey. The Pennsylvania Game Commission is doing a great program right now where they're banding turkeys, catching them because they're studying them. I think a lot of you in some areas may have noticed a decline in some situations in turkeys. And I think there's a lot that has to do with that. But I think the biggest thing is weather. You know, in the last couple of years, when you have those real wet springs and things like that, predators definitely play a role, there's no doubt. But it's not any one thing that affects it. It's kind of a collaboration of things that could hurt the potential. But I think the weather is the biggest thing. You know, so like I said, when you're dealing with these areas, sometimes you may have a lot of turkey there, and maybe one year there was a pile, and next year maybe they declined a little bit there. But the turkey, going back to what I was saying with traveling, when I shot this banded turkey, when you shoot them, you have to call them into the state. So you call it in, you give the band number, and they were able to tell me like he was trapped like 7.5 miles from where I shot him. You know, so he was wintering in a different area than where he ended up later in the springtime. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to know. But to answer your question, I put on a lot of miles traveling, and I put on a lot of miles walking. Like if I have a piece of ground, I love to walk in the woods as it is. Every day at home, I walk them out of my house just for exercise. I like to be outside. I take my boys, my wife, and walk. But I like to go at different times of the year. In the wintertime, I like to go a lot when we got snow because I want to see where the deer use the most. Right? I want to see what they're utilizing, how are they running this hillside. And in the snow, you can see that. Same with turkeys. I'm looking for turkey sign. I'm looking for scratching. I'm looking for feed. Where are they feeding on? You know, where do they roost? You know, and then after you start to get some intel, Well, then year after year, you know, you follow up on that. Well, maybe we had, you know, a turkey in this spot last year, let's check it. Well, he's not there. I also have spots that it's not if they're there, it's when they're there. Sometimes I have a spot like the honey hole, I call it. Well, my buddy Randy, he's come in several times. I tell you what, I've been coming here 10 years. Never shot one at the honey hole. I'm like, well, I'm telling you, this place is smoking, you know, but every time I take them there, we don't hear a thing, like not even like a chickadee. I'm like, bro, I don't get it, it must be you. So it's like, but when they're there, when you catch them in there, majority of the time, you're gonna kill them. You know, because of the way the ground lays in there, the way you fall into it, you've got the ground on them. So to answer your question, cover ground, whether that's walking, whether that's driving, going to new locations, understand where turkeys are living, see if people allow you to hunt. If it's on, if you have like a leash or something, or only one particular place to hunt, you know, a lot of times if you could build your habitat up. I plant a lot of like just straight clover plots because it works well for deer and for turkeys. They'll get out and strut around in it. There's ways to enhance it, but ultimately to kill a turkey, he has to be there. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of utilize that to your advantage. Woodsmanship, you know, that is strictly your ability to understand the woods. You know, like the guys that taught me, like I said, I mean, I grew up hunting with the older generation, you know, my grandpa and all that stuff, and I learned a lot from them, you know, and you can be a great caller, but that's not it. That's not what finishes it. You know what I'm saying? It's being a woodsmanship. It's understanding how to maneuver on turkeys, how to get ground on them, where do they want to work to. A lot of times, you know, you hear people don't call a turkey downhill. You know, I agree with that to an extent, but they will come downhill if they want to go there. You know what I mean? Like, but majority of the time, if you can be above them or even with them, you can work them a lot better where you have the ground on them. Because the other issue with a turkey that's uphill is his vision is unbelievable, right? So you trying to maneuver or get positioned on turkeys that are above you oftentimes is very difficult, you know, so you have to use your woodsmanship to figure out ways, how could I get above them to set up, to get a good setup on them without being seen and things like that. So the woodsmanship side is just to understand basically just being a hunter, you know what I'm saying? Deer season, turkey season, all that stuff, you're basically utilizing things you've learned along the way on your piece of ground or wherever you've been, and, you know, putting it in use to make you more successful in the woods. Like, I don't just utilize, when I'm hunting, I'm not just looking like, oh, well, I can use a mouth call, so I should be able to kill a turkey. You know, there's a lot more that goes into our setups, and the reason that these turkeys are getting close, per se, is I know they want to be there. You know what I mean? Or I know I've watched the way they work there in years past. Where does he want to strut? Where does he want to go? You know, position yourself there, you're more likely to have success there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then like in big sections of timber, you know, what kind of makes them want to be in a certain area? Like what would you key in on if you just were looking at a new piece of land that you've never been to before and I want to scout it?
Yeah, definitely feed. Where are they feeding? You know what I mean? You find scratching a lot in the timber, you know, or they roost in there. You know, a lot of times maybe they're not feeding in this particular block of timber, but they like it for roosting. If you have creeks, a lot of times they'll roost above water because there's not as much activity in the water throughout the night, so they'll sit above creeks and things like that so that they're not being disturbed underneath them as much. So basically, you know, I'm always looking for, number one, you know, are they there? Am I seeing turkeys? If I'm seeing turkeys, what are they feeding on? You know, what are they doing when I see them? Are they just crossing the road? Are they out in a pasture? Are they up in, you know, some timber? And then I start, you know, figuring out why they're here. Oh, they're feeding up on this ridge. They're feeding down in this pasture. You know what I'm saying? And then at different times, you know, early before the season, I always go out and listen. You know, if I have an area that I'm going to hunt before season, I'll just go listen. No calling, no nothing. I just want to hear what they do. I want to hear what he does when he gets down. Where does he go? You know, once he hits the ground, maybe he shuts up and I don't get a chance to. But maybe he hits the ground and 30 minutes later he's gobbling down on the right. Why is he down there? You know what I mean? I think a lot of you probably use Onyx now. You know what I mean? So I use Onyx a ton. Like, okay, well, there's another pasture down there, so he's going down that way. Well, then the next morning I go and listen. If he does the same thing, I know, well, he's got some kind of routine as to why he's going there. You know what I mean? So as I start my setup and I start thinking, well, season's getting close, when we go into hunt him, you know, let's kind of split the difference between where he's ended up and where he started. Any other questions? Regards to calling or decoys or anything like that?
Yeah, I have one. How do you go about to roosting? Like, what calls do you use, and how, you know, without spooking the bird, you don't want to get too close on it.
Sure. Yeah, so like roosting could be an extremely effective tactic, obviously, you know, And honestly, for me, especially for video, and I love to go out and roost a turkey, so I know where he's at. Now, you've heard the term roosted isn't roasted. I mean, just because you roost them doesn't mean it's over in the morning. I mean, I've had my tail kicked a lot on turkeys that I've roosted, but I do like the idea of knowing where I need to start. It gives me the ability to get in there early, get a good setup. You know, the one thing about video that does help with me, I'm kind of the old school. I like to just go out and yelp a turkey up. Matter of fact, that one that I shot with the band, I didn't want any decoys, I didn't want any cameras, I just wanted to go me and my mouth call, like when I was growing up, and go punch my tag on a turkey, just working them through the woods like I used to. And it was a really cool hunt for me. I filmed it on my phone, actually. I just put it on a stump. And you know, he'd come up through there, but roosting those at turkey at night, I like to roost them with soft yelp or cut. And the reason I like to do that, you know, you could roost them with a crow call, owl call, you know, I mean, they'll gobble at a horn sometimes, you know, as we know sometimes. But I like, if I'm gonna hunt a turkey, if I could stay off of him and not bump him, I like to hear what his temperature is at night. Like I could tell you, like, no different than those turkeys in those woods. When Jase and I got out in that patch that night and started calling up on that ridge, just the way they were acting that night told me, like, there is a really good chance in the morning, like, they are going to be back on fire, because they're on fire tonight. So I like them to hear me before they go to bed. Not crazy, you know, just soft yelping, maybe a little cut here or there, just enough to just check his temperature a little bit. But I personally like to roost a turkey off of a turkey call. You know, if I get to an area and say it's like right before dark, like, you know, just a little bit of light, then I'll hoot, you know, because it's not really realistic for them to be carrying on right before. But I like that last little 30 minutes before they go to roost. If I'm out in the woods, or if I'm in an area where I'm trying to, you know, roost one, I like to be able to let him hear me the night before, so that when we start in the morning, you know, he kind of went to bed hearing that. And, you know, we can pick back up that way. Any other questions? Any other concerns? Like your hat.
Thanks.
Yeah. Chase, how about you? Anything I missed?
Why does it take you so long to pull the trigger when the turkeys are?
Security. We have a taser. This kid's out of hand. You'll find out someday.
It's my fault.
It's Jason's fault. He's back there. Let the sun pop behind the clouds just a touch. I want to tell you guys, you know, from the bottom of my heart, how much I appreciate you being here today. You know, we are blessed to live in a country, you know, where we have the freedoms, thanks to our men and women of our military, you know, police officers, all our first responders, to come out here, enjoy a sports show like this, and feel safe doing it. You know, we are blessed to live in the greatest country in the land, and I'm as blessed as could be to come down here and be able to talk to you guys. I never take it for granted. I'm thankful to be on the Outdoor Channel and to be able to represent the hunting heritage of Pennsylvania and to be able to show that in a positive light. For me, I've been a part of a lot of amazing hunts, but nothing has been as incredible as this past deer season. I was able to film my little boy Cruz at 5 years old get his first buck and his first doe. So I understand, I'm sure a lot of you do, I know Jase does, you know, what hunting is about, and it's about passing that down. You know, there's nothing that I do anymore since I got married and, you know, we had our boys. My life is about them. You know, everything that I do is about them and about showing them the right way to be in life and a good way to be to people, and when it comes to hunting, a respectful way to be a hunter and to get out there and promote it in a good light. And like I told you earlier, the greatest gift we can give one another is our time. I appreciate you guys taking time today to come down here to sit and chat about turkeys and listen to some dog bite stories. If you guys do see Eddie down there, be like Nate said, if you go to a dog fight, don't bring you. Do not bring you, because he's got nothing but a beeping horn. That's all he's got. But like I said, you know, this heritage and hunting that we get to share is, it's a sacred thing for me. I know that what it's about. I've had the opportunity to take some amazing animals, but you know, some of the most special are sitting there against an old pine tree with my grandpa eating coconut cream pies and shooting spikes, you know, and I'd give anything to have him back with me today hunting, you know, even though I know he's watching down from the best seat in the house. But I wish you guys the best in the woods. I wish you and your families the best always. And like I said, again, thank you for being here today. And that's Jim Shockey calling it. Tell him the seminar's over. We ain't got time to. But know that I wish you guys nothing but the best. Have a safe season. Be careful. And thank you for your time today. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to me via social. Go ahead.
Do you hunt out blind at all?
So I don't hunt a ton of turkeys out of blinds. I have in the past, and it's not that I have anything against hunting out of blinds, but one thing I'll tell you about a blind that's pretty interesting about turkeys, like when you're hunting whitetails, like to just go pop a blind up sometimes could be risky. You know, I think a lot of you have probably experienced a deer that doesn't like it.
Yep.
You know, if you throw something out and he doesn't like it, you know,
It's different.
that he's not used to, he's gonna freak out. But a lot of times I've been in scenarios where I'm guiding somebody someplace, and you may have a situation where you're hunting big fields, right? And maybe there's just a few trees along the edge of it. And those turkeys, every day, they'll roost on the edge of that field, but the first thing they'll do in the morning is pitch 150 yards out in the middle of that field. And then they'll be out there always out of gun range all day long. Doesn't matter what side of that field you get to, they're out in the middle, and then right at dark, they go to wherever they want to roost, and at 75 yards, they start running and fly up into the tree. The next day, same time. So at different times, we have actually positioned blinds out in the middle of those fields at dark. You know, we'll go out in the dark, get the blind situated. Next day, go out there, because the thing about a turkey, like going back to the strut in front of the pickup truck, you know, they just don't notice that that thing is new. Like they'll come in the next day and just drag his wings against it, you know, coming over, but it gives you the ability to get out there in the situation. For me personally, I just like the idea, as you see from the videos, I love the idea of, like, if I could catch one, I would catch one. It'd probably hurt terribly, you know what I mean? But like, I love it when they are close, you know, when they don't know I'm there and I'm out amongst them. But I have utilized blinds, especially in those types of scenarios. They're also great. They help with your movement. You know, maybe you're bow hunting, maybe you're crossbow hunting, or, you know, they do a good job of concealing you more, you know, so that you can get away with them more. Taking kids, things like that, you know, they're great. And for anybody, really. Like I said, I'm not against blind hunting by any means. I just don't use them as much as I do just straight out against a tree. Any other questions?
What sort of tips would you have for going after them in the rain?
In the rain?
Yeah.
I like 2 creams, 3 sugars in my coffee. You know what I mean?
Stay home.
No. We've had some.
He's killed them in the rain.
Yeah, no. We've had some unbelievable hunts in the rain. Jase has had some. I'm talking about like absolute downpour rain, and that turkey is throwing water off his head, gobbling.
Yeah.
Obviously, when it rains, they push to those fields a lot. You know what I mean? They get out in those fields, and obviously, you know, sometimes with the rain, depending how heavy it is, it's over for us a little bit because of the cameras.
Right.
You know what I mean? Jason starts sprinkling, and you're like, oh, the world's ending. You know, Jason's like, you don't even understand. You don't know what this camera, more than your life it's worth. This camera.
I sound just like that too.
This
Yeah.
camera, you know what? I'd rather you go to this camera. But it's one of those things to where, for us, it's over, but you can find success in the rain. I mean, and that's a great situation for a blind there. There's nothing like a blind and a cup of coffee on a rainy morning, you know what I'm saying? Turkey is just like deer. I mean, they gotta be out in it. You know, they don't really have a choice when it's raining, but I've seen them work good in it. I've seen them actually like work like to where like Jase's, for example. Like, I can't believe he was gobbling that hard in that hard of rain. Like, I'm talking about a downpour.
Yeah.
But a light rain, I love. A light rain, I love, because I feel like they make themselves like, they're vulnerable. They get out in those pastures, they get out in those fields. You know, they make themselves a little bit more vulnerable, I think, in rain. But I'm definitely not against hunting in the rain by any means, you know, but for me, it's the same kind of success, you know, or the same kind of tactics, I should say. Other than the fact that you gotta go with hearing, right? If it's raining hard, they're not gonna hear you as well.
Right.
You also run the chance, if you're running and gunning per se, of spooking a lot. Like, you know, another thing going back to like the woodsmanship stuff or roosting, I always wanna be very gentle on how I'm doing this stuff. Like, I'm not like just walking into the woods and calling, like, you know, I'm always kind of like hunting from the outside in, just taking my time, because you don't want to go in there if he's not gobbling for whatever reason in the afternoon and booger them. Same thing with the rain. If you don't have a visual, if you don't know where they may end up in the rain, like, you know, for example, like a lot of times if they get to those pastures, maybe you have one. Well, I'm gonna go there, it's supposed to rain today, maybe they'll push down in there, you know, with the rain. But I always use caution in walking too much in the rain, because I've boogered a lot of turkeys, you know, by going too, you know, because I can't hear them or they can't hear me, or maybe they're just not doing anything and I'm just walking aimlessly.
Right.
You know, so I think when it comes to rain, if you know where they're headed or you know where they're going, you know, you could definitely have success in the rain, just like you would when it's not. But, you know, don't be afraid to hit the diner either. You know what I mean? It's also a good excuse. You know? It's an option. You know, it's an option. Any other questions? Go ahead.
You touched on the point of trying to call them uphill as opposed to
Yeah.
downhill. I always found that you wanted to call them uphill because they wanna have the chance to turn around and take off flying.
Sure.
If you're calling them downhill, they have to run, they can't fly.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, there's no doubt that they always want to have the upper hand, right? So they don't want to position themselves because they're survivors. Turkeys are survivors. Like we were saying, maybe they're not smart, but they don't want to die. You know what I'm saying? They're a surviving animal. But I've had them in either scenario. A lot of times, like at my lease, for example, they want to come down to this low field. That's where they're gonna go most of the time. Well, a lot of times he'll fly into the ridge, you know, land into the ridge, and then he'll walk down that hill, coming down to that field. You know what I mean? Because that's where he wants to go anyways. And it really comes down to, you know, at the same time, sometimes when they're coming down, they're difficult too. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to come, but they can already see. You know what I mean? Like they already see way better coming down that hill than they would coming up it. Like when they're coming up, they have to keep coming to get the ground. You know what I'm saying? But it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Yeah, they want to have the ability to get out of there as fast as they could. You know, my point to that was, I've seen them do all kinds of things. It's just where they want to go. You know, a couple of years ago, we were up in New Jersey, and this is probably before hen hunters, 10, 12 years ago. And we got to cutting and yelping there at the Delaware River, and a turkey was gobbling in Pennsylvania. Just screaming gobbling over there. You know, like, ain't that something? You know, we'd be able to maybe go over there. Well, me and my buddy sat there and we had a granola bar and we're talking back and forth. All of a sudden we just happened to look out there and it looked like a bald eagle just coming across that river. And I was like, surely that wasn't that turkey, was it? He's like, I don't know. And he had flown straight across, you know, just to come over there. He's gonna do that every day? Of course not. But he can. It just depends on if they want to. A lot of times in Pennsylvania, New York, mountainous regions, you know, anywhere really that has mountains. Has anybody here seen them fly ridge to ridge? Where like you'll be on one ridge, turkey be gobbling over there, next you know, boom. I mean, just come. Sometimes when they want to, they will do some crazy things. Now that's not gonna be a majority of the time, you know, but I agree with your point that there's no doubt that he's gonna wanna have the ability to get out of there if he needs to. But if he's locked in and he's lonely and he thinks she's down there, he's probably gonna come, you know what I mean? If you know, it's not like he won't come down it per se. But there's no doubt, if I had the choice to work him up a hill, even with him, or down, I'm going with up or even before I'm going down. You know what I'm saying? Anything else? We all good? Anybody coming to the concert tomorrow night? No, we're just worried about turkey season. No mosh pits for us. No mosh pits for us. I'll be there in the mosh pit. You know, but outside of that. But like I said, guys, thank you so much. What are you doing back there? We already had to get a kid taken out of here by security. Were you the one behind the wall yesterday with the distress calls?
No,
You're just afraid to tell me the truth because you've seen me fight in the UFC. I'm kidding. Guys, I wish you know, yesterday during my seminar, literally there was like a predator thing going on, and every other word was just like, everybody was like, it's hard to pretend we don't hear it. You know what I mean? It's hard to pretend we don't hear it. But guys, I'm Nate Hosie. Thank you for your time tonight. Wish nothing but the best. Good luck with the turkey list.
You'd like to give us some feedback on the seminar back here?
Don't give them that option. Jase, I needed you up there, dude. Thank you, brother.
I wanted to ask you a quick question. You ever use the fan?
Oh yeah, in states it's legal 100%.
Yeah? It's not legal in all states?
No, Pennsylvania, you cannot shield yourself. Like, you cannot utilize it as a blind
Yeah.
or anything like that. But in states like that that are legal,
Yeah.
it is legal.
My pastor, big turkey hunter from South Carolina.